tomorrow we have 4 families making a trip from Japan, so we wanted to present them with something.
Many people died on the American side of the border.
日華与達会社は、カナダの
I lost my brother Charlie. He was buried here in Revelstoke yesterday. I have resigned my position and have not worked since the accident happened, as I certainly don't want another experience like it. It has completely unnerved me as far as the person is concerned.
Our recent awareness of it began with some emails probably last summer, maybe last spring, from Tomoaki Fujimura, who was a person of Japanese descent from Revelstoke, who was inquiring with our clerks about the whereabouts, location, information of a number of Japanese men who we then found out had all died as a result of this avalanche in Rogers Pass in 1910. He was searching for, I think, around 28, 30 men, and we found them here. So when we became aware of that, it's sort of, wow, that's fascinating little piece of certainly BC history, Canadian history. On the actual 100th anniversary of that disaster, the cemetery staff planted 16 Yoshino Japanese cherries that essentially outline and mark the area where these 32 Japanese men were buried 100 years ago. But there was still more that we felt we needed to do in terms of marking and identifying these graves.
What happened was Katrina Hearn from Lee & Associates, which is a landscape architectural firm, we had worked together on another project, and she told me about this concept that they were working on. There has been a memorial set up in Revelstoke, and it uses the paper crane as part of its symbology. And I really liked the concept, so Katrina asked me if I would like to take on the project and develop a crane motif. The pattern that seemed most appropriate to me was the cherry blossom. The cherry blossom has been used in Japanese as a Japanese symbol since the days of the samurai. So the process that I use to get to this is I take this wax base clay, create the basic shape. From this, I take a primary mold, and this rubber picks up all of the detail. It'll even pick up fingerprints if that's what I want to cast. I can pour then a plaster copy of this piece that I've been sculpting. Then I take this piece and I get in with my tools, clean it up, and then on this I work the pattern. This is a pattern from a Japanese pattern book, and I love these kind of resources. I just draw it out in pencil, freehand, and then I just start to work away with the dental tools and start to just carefully hand carve in the shape. The important thing for me with this was to remember that what I was creating here is a paper crane, so that this detail shouldn't go exceptionally deep. It should just be a surface detail. So it's a pattern. This is the finished bronze. So it's handmade, it's rough, it has individual character. And so that's also what I wanted to portray in this. And it was also very, very important to me about the scale of the marker, so that the marker didn't overwhelm this.
So we came up with this idea or notion of not marking the graves with a traditional headstone or marker, because they were unmarked and they had been for 100 years, and somehow that seemed not necessarily appropriate, but to place a traditional marker on the grave wouldn't really reflect the unique circumstances, I guess, that really brought these 32 Japanese men together and resulted in them being here in the cemetery. We have 4 families making a trip from Japan. We wanted to present them with something, a token to, again, symbolize what we've done here, something for them to take back. So we actually had additional bronze cranes cast, and they're placed in a nice mahogany frame. So tomorrow we'll be gifting to each of these Japanese families a matching bronze medallion. It's important that we do this kind of thing. I mean, if we leave it up to the families and to the individuals and to society to take responsibility for commemorating, marking, and remembering these kinds of events, they will be forgotten. Not all of them, but many of them will be. So I think it's incumbent upon places like the cemetery who know of these events to keep them top of mind and recurring, and do something to commemorate them, mark them, honor them, and not let them fade away.
You will be sitting. Okay. And do you need the microphone, or you just... Yeah, that's nice. Okay.
My name is Glenn Hodges, and I am the manager of the City of Vancouver's Mountain View Cemetery, and I welcome you here this morning. We're here today to pay honor and tribute and commemorate the lives of 58 people who died in an avalanche in Rogers Pass on March 4th, 1910. 34 of those men were buried in Mountain View Cemetery over the following weeks, and 32 of those men were from Japan. Today is about honoring those men, especially the 32 Japanese men, and we're fortunate to have with us today 4 families of those men who've made the trip from Japan, and I'd like to acknowledge them now and introduce the Abe family, the Imamura family, the Kumagi family, and the Yamaji family. From Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Professor Norifumi Kawahara, who has done a tremendous amount of research on this work.
It's my pleasure to be here today and take part in this dedication. It's important, I think, for the City of Vancouver to do this ongoing work to recognize the history of our city and the people that helped to build both our city, our province, and our country. And this opportunity that presents ourselves today with this work that's being done under the leadership of Mr. Hodges is very important to us. And of course, I want to thank everyone that has contributed to make this day possible. On behalf of the 1910 Rogers Pass Snowslide Committee, I would like to thank you for inviting me to be part of this morning's service. The committee began planning ways to commemorate the accident on its 100th anniversary this year. We felt that this was important for 2 main reasons. to remember the men who died, and to encourage avalanche safety in the mountains. Rogers Pass is about 455 kilometers northwest of Vancouver, in the heart of the Selkirk Mountains. The snow avalanche that took the lives of these brave men on March 4th, 1910, in Rogers Pass was the largest avalanche accident in Canadian history. The oldest victim was John McLennan, age 48, from Scotland. The youngest, Takafusa Imamura, age 19, from Japan. Brave men from Asia, Europe, and North America, working together, died together. Today, they are remembered together once again.
Today, on the occasion of the 1910 Rogers Pass Snowslide Commemoration Memorial Service, I would like to express my deepest sympathy for those who suddenly lost their young lives at Rogers Pass. Let me express my sincere gratitude to Dr. John Woods, who has been working hard to put this event together. I would like to also thank the representatives from Mountain View Cemetery, the City of Revelstoke, Canadian Pacific Railway, Parks Canada, Deputy Mayor Raymond Louis from the City of Vancouver, and everyone here for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this morning to honor the Japanese avalanche victims.
You'll see to my right, at the northwest corner of where the men were buried, we've erected a sentinel, and behind me to the left, another red cloth that is covering a sentinel. Those two posts will permanently mark in a very visible way the corner of the area where these men were buried. Now what I'd like to go into is a gift exchange. So the families that have come from Japan have some cranes that they would like to give to certain representatives. On behalf of Mountain View Cemetery in the city of Vancouver, we felt it was very appropriate that we take this bronze crane that we have created for the grave sites, and we've created a special commemorative one that I would now like to ask Deputy Mayor Raymond Louie to assist me to give these cranes to each of the family members. None of this would have been possible had it not been for the efforts of one person. So I'm honored to present a crane as well to Tomoaki Fujimura. Thank you very much. The final step then is to tie in the cemetery's marking with the actual memorial site that Parks Canada has created up in Rogers Pass. And so we'll be taking one of the grave markers up to that memorial site, and it will be placed and become part of that Parks Canada memorial. So there'll be a direct link there. We'll go up to Revelstoke for the opening of the museum exhibit on Saturday, and then Sunday we'll join staff from Canadian Pacific, Parks Canada, and ride the train from Revelstoke to Rogers Pass for the official dedication of the memorial park site they've created up there.
I'd also like to welcome Glenn Hodges from Mountain View Cemetery in Vancouver. Feel free to take photographs. If there's any of the material in the album that anyone wants copies of, I'd be very happy to provide that for you. And thanks again for coming.
壁刈りの先生、初期ですが、そちらの方に伺っています。今回この展示に至りましては、本当に皆様の協力がないとできないということでありがたいということです。
I got called in from committees to join in and doing research for the 30 somewhat Japanese. They didn't know exactly the numbers, so they want to know the name, where they're from, why they are here. So I started involving with them last year, 2009, February. Canada Nippon Sapporo Companies is formed by the Canadian president and the vice president's name Saori Goto, and formed in Burrard in downtown Vancouver. And they found out there would be the initial, or it needs to fill up the Chinese absence, because after the Chinese left the CPR, they need more workers to maintain as well as extend a few more railways beside one track.
日華与達会社は、カナダの鉄道もしくは炭鉱、そういったところの人たちに、日本人移民を多く送り出すために作られた会社だということを知っております。
Yeah, well, mostly they came here alone. Without families, as a group, like friends to the neighborhood or cousins, to many relatives, because they didn't speak many English at all at that time. So they came here basically by themselves, without wives or children or family. Quite of them were single at that time, and then later on they get married by pictures exchange, or they had wives or so brought over.
1907年に契約をして1910年までの3年間の契約で、一度来ることになっています。
There is a documentation in Tokyo. The foreign ministers of foreign affairs archive has that thick of information about of the compensation.
当時のカナダドルで150ドルから300ドル、今でしたらどれぐらいか少しちょっと分かりません。 当時やはり、日本人は、酒缶詰工場もしくはソーミル製材所もしくはランバージャックそういったところに働く人たちそして鉄道の保線工そういったところに多くの男性は働いていたと思います。一部の男性もしくは女性はハウスキーピングの仕事などで、白人の人たち現地の人たちのお手伝いをしていたと思います。
And he was just able to speak English, therefore he became the leader, gang leader of that group and a few others or so. So they had more knowledge and talent. Back in Japan they were taught in some English. That's why they are in the middleman kind of idea. According to the Tariku Nippo, which is a Japanese newspaper 100 years ago, the English name is the Continental News, which you can look at UBC archive. What they said is after the first avalanche occurred and buried a track, 111 people are dispatched. 68 out of 111 were Japanese actually, and left over are the Caucasians, and they were on site digging the snow, but we didn't have that details in the English versions. I don't know why we don't have it.
やはり当時の日本人への見方がどうしてもこう寂しい立場であったということは間違いないと思います。ですので大陸日報という日本人新聞の中でしか日本人の様子がなかなか知られてこなかった。しかもその大陸日報の記事を日本人の研究者もしっかりと見ることがなかった。そういったことで日本でも知られていなかった事実だったと思います。
When we got to the railway museum to register for this, they had assembled all of the 58 lantern boats, which will be launched as part of the Toro Nagashi ceremony tonight. So all the Japanese names had been written by the Japanese families, and they needed someone to write out the English names. So myself and Sensei Leslie from the Buddhist community in Calgary wrote out the 28 names of the English gentlemen or non-Japanese who died 100 years ago. So that was kind of nice.
Mazunori Imamura, descendant of Takifusa Imamura, will provide a few words. Anao Fume and Tadaoki Kumagai, descendants of Shoke Kumagai, will share a poem.
At today's ceremony for the avalanche disaster of March the 4th, 1910, I would like to pay tribute to the souls of the victims on behalf of the bereaved families.
兄忠興と一緒にこうして立ちお参りできますこと誠に感無量であります。
Today, I finally arrived here with my older brother, and I am overwhelmed to be on this ground where you worked.
祖父の体に近づきそっと頬に触れる幼子のすみません柔らかな手のぬくもりを そのよう感じさせてくれることはなかったのですか。極寒の寒さに身を震わせ、かじかんだその手で、祖父よ、あなたはこの世の何を使おうとしたのですか。
From its earliest days, Rogers Pass has been famous for its snow and snow slides. In a deadly combination of steep slopes and heavy snowfall, the snow can suddenly break free from the mountain slopes and descend with tornado strength power. One of nature's great forces, snowslides have the power to cut through the forests and have produced the many treeless avalanche paths that you can see throughout these mountains. As evening approached on March 4th, a slide came down the slopes of Mount Cheops, just south of where we're gathered today and behind you. At that time, the railway ran over the summit, approximately where you see and hear the highway behind me. Cutting through the avalanche debris with a huge rotary plow, men and equipment worked into the night. Then, just before midnight, a second slide broke, this time from Avalanche Mountain, opposite the first slide and directly across from us today. As dawn broke on the morning of March 5th, the sight around us would have been chaos. A huge rotary snowplow hurled onto its side, the work train locomotive nowhere to be seen beneath the snow, and crews of men everywhere digging for possible survivors.
I can only imagine how heart-wrenching it must have been for him to have returned to the site and encountered such devastating silence and darkness as he did. And I'm going to read to you a bit of a letter that he wrote on March the 14th, 1910, to Alan Urquhart, who was a foreman in the Fraser Canyon at the time. Dear Alan, I just took a notion to drop you a few lines this evening. No doubt you have seen in the daily papers about the terrible accident we had at Rogers Pass. I lost my brother Charlie. He was buried here in Revelstoke yesterday. I have resigned my position and have not worked since the accident happened, as I certainly don't want another experience like it. It has completely unnerved me as far as bucking snow is concerned. We had a storm that lasted for 10 days, and during that time we had over 8 feet of a snowfall besides slides. I was clearing a slide at the new diversion opposite 17 shed. I left for about a half an hour to go down to the watch shed at 18 shed and send a message to Revelstoke. And when I returned, I found everything buried. A slide about half a mile long had come down from the south side of the track. I found the rotary pitched right on top of the shed. Everything was in darkness and the wind blowing hard, and 58 men buried in the slide. I have been to 1 or 2 funerals every day this week, and there is a large number of bodies left at the undertaking parlor. Well, Ellen, you can imagine how bad I felt about losing all those men. Yours very truly, John Anderson.
In honor of those who came before, Parks Canada is proud to open the Rogers Pass Memory Garden. As Mr. Fisher joins Tomoaki and Yuko Fujimura to ring the bell and open the exhibit.
This is the Rogers Pass Memory Garden. The design is inspired heavily by Japanese dry gardens. What we did is we started with a triangular shape of the design to match the avalanche that came down right above us. Inside are corner pieces that are intended to look like Japanese screens. On each Japanese screen is relief sculptures that come out. They are subtle sculptures that frame in the space. Everything in here has some sort of significance to it. The rock in the middle comes from a deactivated CPR Stone Arch Bridge, and it's been hand-hewn. If you look closely, you can see where the feather and wedges split it apart. Coming off the side are two rails, and they're stamped 1885. They were actually found not too far from here, just in the Illecillewaet River. The bell itself is a 1907 steam engine bell. The ornamental bird's eye gravel is intended to be raked and raked by the visitors too. So this piece has two interactive elements. One is to ring the bell, hear the sound of a tray bell in Rogers Pass, which you haven't heard in almost 100 years. And the other interactive element is to rake patterns into the gravel. The gravel is meant to represent the snowpack of Rogers Pass.
To start lighting come down here, and the first row here are going to be families who are here.
上に縛り付けたりですね。
はい、安倍さん。
熊谷さんです。
今村さん。はい。ちょっと来るよ。
Thank you, Tomo.
Yeah, thank you.
Another one?
Oh, is it going to stay?
Just wait for it.
Yes. what surprised me the most in Revelstoke was at the dedication of the memory garden at Rogers Pass, when one of the family members read a poem about his grandfather. So the one brother read the poem and the story, the other brother was holding a book with a photo of his grandfather and all the other family members, and just the emotion that you could hear in his voice and see on the brother's face holding the book, and the way that the visceral way in which standing at the site where their grandfather had died 100 years ago, the way that affected them, I dare say almost more than being at their gravesite, that really was a moment that will stay in my mind for a long time.
小野寺武史、熊谷翔慶、佐藤健次郎、安倍正虎、池田直作、石山金作、小林光一、武田康晴、堀内平吉、前田勘十郎、望月康次郎、今村武房、大竹喜三郎、田辺銀蔵、上野慶三郎、佐々木喜太郎、辻村仙太郎、川崎愛太郎、平野晋三、三宅喜太郎、水川房吉、坪井源一、金川健一、佐々木誠一、武田徳一、平野勇、松本清、和佐音吉、林田松江、大村今朝吉、迫田彦八、山地万之助、グリフィス・トーマス、モーン・ジョン・ティー。